I suggest you put away your weapons, good people.
The latest season of The Witcher has not only recast its protagonist, it also introduced new faces into the mix, and the show's new vampire has easily been one of the most fan-awaited characters yet. Initially introduced as a mystery medicine man met by Geralt and his crew inside a centuries-old haunted cemetery, Regis offers them hospitality for the night and gradually joins the Witcher's Hansa in their search for Ciri across the continent. Regis was first introduced in The Baptism of Fire by Andrzej Sapkowski and has also played quite the role in the Witcher video game franchise. While there are certainly many significant differences in the show version of Regis compared to the book version, one of the most famous monster hunters in the land counts a vampire as one of his closest allies. Having said that, let's discuss who's the newest vampire in The Witcher show and what makes him unique compared to other, more mainstream bloodsuckers. Before we get into this explanation, we do have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Who was Regis in The Witcher books? Exactly like we see in The Witcher Season 4, the vampire's full name in the books is also Emil Regis Rohelic Terzif Godfrey, but given that that's quite the mouthful, he prefers to go by Regis. As we mentioned before, Regis first appeared in Baptism of Fire, which was the third book in Andrzej Sapkowski's Witcher series. Geralt of Rivia met Regis during his search for Ciri, and that's how Regis decided to join the Witcher and his companions in their quest. Initially, Regis appeared to be a simple, harmless healer, but eventually it was revealed that he was actually a vampire who had given up drinking blood. Although Geralt is hesitant to trust Regis at first, the two become very good friends, and in due time, his help proves essential in the Witcher's fight against Vilgefortz. Now, Geralt's relationship with Regis has always been a complicated one because Regis's vampiric nature categorizes him as a monster, and it was Geralt's duty as a Witcher to take him out of the equation. However, Regis proves that not only was he an asset, he was also a loyal friend as he offered Geralt sage advice whenever the situation presented it, and his abilities as a vampire made him a powerful ally to fight against the Witcher's enemies. It was through Regis's nature that Geralt learned that not all monsters were truly what they appeared to be. Now, the books introduce Regis as a very powerful higher vampire who was more than 400 years old when he first met Geralt of Rivia. Turns out he looks so human because he belonged to the upper class and was a naturally born vampire rather than some human who was transformed into a bloodsucker by a vampire. By the time Geralt comes across him, he was the barber surgeon of Dillingen because he was very well educated in different subjects, even be considered a polymath. As his backstory goes, in his younger years, Regis had apparently developed some bad habits to fit in with the rest of his kind. While drinking blood was never a necessity for higher vampires, it was still seen as an intoxicating substance similar to alcohol, and the vampires who refused to drink blood were considered lame in the vampire ranks. So, after falling to peer pressure, he began to partake in blood and soon found out that he was no longer shy around vampire women when he was under the influence of the high he received from drinking blood. However, with time, his habit got worse and worse to the point that he would spend several nights away before returning to the crypt, and even just a drop of blood would make him lose control. He eventually began to go solo in his regular hunts for blood without even caring about any friends tagging along with him. Regis later settled down with a vampire female, but that didn't go on for too long as she soon left him, and wallowing in that grief, he further sunk into his blood-sucking habits. However, it finally all came to a head when one night he was sent out by some of his vampire boys to fetch some blood. Apparently, he was flying under the influence and missed his target in the process, thus smashing straight into the village well, causing the villagers to nearly kill him by chopping his head off, stabbing him with stakes, and pouring holy water on him before burying him 6 feet under. Fortunately, none of this could actually kill him, but Regis was in no condition to move anytime soon, so he spent the next 50 years regenerating underground, which gave him more than enough time to think about his behavior, and that's how ultimately he decided to never drink blood again. Regis's lore in The Witcher video games. Drinking Vampire was also a very important character in the game expansion of The Witcher 3: The Wild Hunt, titled Blood and Wine. In the game, we see Geralt traveling to Toussaint in search of a monster who turns out to be a vampire serial killer named Detlaf van der Eretin. During his journey, Geralt runs into his old friend Regis, who has apparently been protecting Detlaf after the accused vampire saved his life. Naturally, the game progresses as Regis goes on to help Geralt in his search for the motive behind the savage murders, and goes on to play a big part in the choices that the player must make in deciding Detlaf's fate. Regis's role in Blood and Wine is not only a fun callback for fans of the books, it also helps us dig deeper into his character throughout the video game, as he not only offers Geralt a conduit into the dark world of bloodsuckers that haunt the night, but also adds a lot of complex nuance to the overall plot. Without Regis and his insights, Geralt only knew Dettlaff as a killer who needed to be destroyed rather than the victim of tragic circumstances. Not only did Regis help Geralt navigate his quest by pulling the Witcher out of his tunnel vision on all beasts, he also offers him perspective and companionship throughout Geralt's perilous journey. What is the vampire's backstory in Netflix's The Witcher? If you've already watched Season 4, you know that the Netflix show has given the vampire a similar backstory with a few more twists that only adds more meat to his character. So, after everyone from the Hansa finds out that Regis is a vampire, he starts telling us the story of his life, which gives us information about what would make a vampire stop drinking blood. From what we're shown in Episode 5's crisp animated flashback sequence, Regis apparently never partook in bloodlust 400 years ago, but then vampires who didn't participate in the consumption of human blood were ostracized within the vampirical society, so to save himself from a lonely life, Regis allowed his desires to overtake him under the burden of peer pressure. Now, like we previously discussed in Sapkowski's books, Regis's vampirism was a very clear analogy for alcoholism, and this is something the show heavily leans into while framing his origin story. So the bloodlust was like an addiction for young Regis, who drank to the brim for years, to the point that he gave in to all his worst impulses. All he could remember from those days was the brooding darkness and evil that the bloodlust induced in him. On one fine day, while Regis was scouring the village for a fresh drink under his usual state of euphoric drunkenness, he accidentally tipped over and fell down a well. However, in this version of the story, this turned out to be a happy accident that helped him find the love of his life. The next morning, Regis was helped by a kind human woman named Bethane, and soon she became the light that his dreary life was desperately lacking. As the two fell in love, Regis completely stopped drinking blood or consorting with his vampire peers. Moreover, Bethane was a herbalist, and in their time together, she taught him everything about plants and natural medicine, which explains where Regis picked up so much of his knowledge. Unfortunately, his old coven of vampires were rather unhappy about this, as they viewed this romance as Regis playing with his food, so they decided to put a stop to it by kidnapping Bethane from the market. As Regis grew worried about her not returning home on time, he rushed out to look for her, only to find that his old peers were gradually draining the life out of her. Despite his efforts, Regis was sadly too late to save her life, and so he went on a bloody rampage, killing all the other vampires, an act that Bethane witnessed in her final moments, so she died being in absolute terror of him. Right at that moment, the villagers, who had come to know of Regis through his relationship with Bethane, arrived to find him at the center of the gory onslaught, holding her dead body whilst being surrounded by the bloody bodies of the vampires he'd killed. As a result, the villagers killed the remaining vampires before blaming Regis for Bethane's death. They then staked his heart, decapitated him, and buried his dismembered remains in the ground alongside Bethane. As chilling as it sounds, that incident still didn't kill him, because in the Witcher world, vampires can regenerate from almost any wound, including being dismembered or stabbed with a wooden stake. And so, for the next 50 years, or half a century as Regis likes to say, the vampire slowly healed and regenerated his body while being haunted by his terrible mistakes. Now, despite the group's initial misunderstanding and caution of the vampire, Regis soon became an integral part of Geralt's traveling party as he joins the ragtag company of Milva, Jaskier, Cahir, Zoltan, Percival, and Yarpen. Along with being an ally and helping the gang on their journey, we see the vampire almost instantly offering them shelter, along with food and drink, at his cottage at the old elven cemetery. Even after that, he keeps helping them in several dangerous encounters, such as a seemingly impossible test set by a crazed priest during a witch hunt of 2 girls in a refugee camp. In fact, Regis even saves Geralt's life, helps take care of his leg, and also stitches up Jaskier's bleeding wound. Eventually, the Witcher began considering him a close companion and friend after realizing that the vampire means no harm. It's not often that a higher vampire will willingly befriend a self-confessed monster hunter such as Geralt, let alone save one. But this dynamic and Regis's actions helped to change the Witcher's black and white view of sentient monsters, thus significantly changing his outlook, perspective, and signature cynical nature that we saw back in Season 1. What exactly are higher vampires in the Witcher lore? In the Witcherverse lore, vampires are actually divided into different species and classes. Apparently, the lesser vampires tend to be more animalistic and behave more like primitive predators, while the higher class vampires are far more intelligent, powerful, and often appear more human-like. Lesser vampires, such as Ekimas and Fletters, are common enemies in the games. On the other hand, Higher vampires include creatures like Bruxae, Alps, Katakens, Neckarats, and Mulas. These vampires are actually a step above in both strength and intelligence, but here's where it gets a bit more tricky, because in the Witcher universe, higher vampires are actually split into two main categories. One being the higher class vampires, and the other being the true higher vampires. While they both share similar traits and abilities like telepathy and shapeshifting, the true higher vampires like Regis and Detlef van der Eretine are significantly stronger and almost invincible. In fact, they can only be permanently killed by another true higher vampire. Plus, Witchers, who can easily kill lesser vampires with silver swords, are powerless against true higher vampires, which definitely makes them an entirely different kind of threat. What myths does Regis break about vampirism in the Witcher's world? Unlike the common myths propagated by the mainstream media, through Regis, we find out that vampires in the world of The Witcher don't care much about silver, garlic, or sunlight. In fact, the 428-year-old vampire can exist in the sun just like anyone else and not get burned, meaning that in this world, vampires being burned by direct exposure to sunlight is only true in folktales. We also find out that vampires love seasoning just as much as humans do, and they prefer their food with garlic, which definitely doesn't break them into hives or kill them. The bloodsuckers of the Witcher lore drink blood only to achieve a certain high and don't really depend on it for survival. Unlike what we see in popular shows like Vampire Diaries, where the vampires grow weak and start to desiccate out of starvation from not drinking blood, just eat normal food to keep themselves full. In fact, even without food, they can sustain for over half a century, as seen in Regis's case, who literally regenerated from a dismemberment without needing any source of food or magical energy. The concept of blood-sucking in The Witcher is done mostly because of the dopamine boost, which is why Regis could go on living without a single drop of blood for so long. Lastly, no amount of silver or a wooden stake to the heart can kill vampires in The Witcher, meaning that it's almost impossible for Regis to die. Regis is definitely a shapeshifter. So midway into Season 4 of The Witcher, a shocking thing happens after Geralt solves the riddle given to him by the Rusalkas living in the swamps, thus saving himself and his friends. To get a better view so he could guide the crew out of the swamps easily. Now, this whole dynamic shapeshifting into a bat had long been considered an elaborate myth in the vampire physiology, but that's definitely not the case in the Witcher franchise, because higher vampires like Regis possess unique abilities which allow them to turn invisible, bewitch humans with their gaze, and easily transform into a bat. Now, we haven't seen Regis overpower anyone with his bewitching gaze, but we do see him simply appearing behind Jaskier out of thin air and also having a rather convincing way with words. Whether that counts as a superpower or not remains to be seen in the final season of the show. How powerful is Regis in The Witcher? Well, Regis definitely has superpowered abilities like being as strong as The Witcher, if not more so, and also being rather fast in speed while being discreet, but we think his biggest power is his intellect. Not only is the guy strategic and diplomatic, he also has all the knowledge he amassed throughout his 4th-century existence in the world, and real fans know how knowledge is the biggest weapon in this universe. Now, we don't really get to see Regis in full action in the Netflix series, but within the books and games, the vampire possesses unique abilities such as mind manipulation, invisibility, and the ability to fly, even though he often chooses not to use them. In fact, he's also immune to certain toxins that can even kill a Witcher, and lastly, there's also the fact that the guy is essentially immortal. I mean, he was literally decapitated and dismembered, but it only took him 50 years of lying in a grave to put himself back together. Vampire years isn't really a lot. We really hope they spend a bit more time fleshing out Regis's character in Season 5. But tell us, what do you guys think about the depiction of vampires in the Witcher lore? Most importantly, what's your verdict on Regis's depiction in the Netflix show? Let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below, and while you're down there, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.